morning and welcome to the African Utility Week studio. My name is Amy Ryan, Deputy Editor of Metering and Smart Energy International, and today I have with me Kathy Nelson, who is the Principal Telecommunications Engineer at Great River Energy. Thank you so much for joining us, Kathy.
Thank you.
How have you been enjoying African Utility Week so far?
It's an amazing conference. I've had a great time meeting people and visiting all the vendor booths, and it's been a great expo.
Kathy, what were some of the key points raised in the IT-OT convergence panel discussion that you participated in yesterday?
So a lot of the panel discussion talked about the technical issues of dealing with IT and OT, but from my perspective, the manpower issues were probably more of an issue when we went through an IT-OT convergence, which was probably about 10 years ago. And so in my experience, it's the people that you need to really be concerned about when you're looking at IT-OT convergence, and making sure that people in the IT department really understand what the requirements are from the OT side, and the people from the OT side of the business can really understand what IT brings to the table, and you really need to get the two groups working together more so than the technology. It's really very much a people challenge, much more so than a technology challenge, in my opinion.
And then how can utilities leverage their communications infrastructure to make the most of the assets?
Well, in the past, we've had to have communication systems that are dependent upon the application. So you'd have a different communication system, a different communication network for every different application. And one of the advantages that an IP transition brings is the ability to run multiple applications on one network. And so I would say that's probably the easiest way, is having one network that satisfies multiple applications, and then trying to, if you can, partner with other entities so that you can more efficiently run your networks and take advantage of infrastructure that other utilities have in place.
And then how important do you think technology providers or partnerships are in terms of selecting a communications solution and then considering scalability and longevity of that communications technology as well?
I would say it's absolutely critical, because in the past our communication networks have been more like the electrical side of the business, where things would run for about 30 years and we wouldn't have to replace them for a very long time. And things are different now. So you might only get 10 years out of a communication network. And so making sure that you have a vendor partner who's going to be around for a long time, making sure that they are keeping your networks supported, making sure that you get firmware upgrades, and keeping your network so that it can run as reliably as possible is extremely important. So having that continuous conversation with your vendors partners is much more critical than it used to be in the past.
What are some of the challenges associated with regard to the selection of the communications technology, seeing that there is so much choice with regards to what utilities can choose?
So I would say one of the biggest challenges we have are we don't have access to dedicated radio frequency spectrum in very many places in the world. It's a challenge, it's a global challenge for utilities. And one of our biggest challenges is finding standards that apply to spectrum that we have access to. So when you're trying to run a wireless network, we don't have access to spectrum where we can build LTE systems, where we can build WiMAX systems. And so that becomes very challenging, because then almost all of our providers are proprietary, and you get yourself into a situation where it might not be supported, or where the company might go out of business, and that's a very big challenge. So trying to get the industry to develop standards for smaller bandwidth applications that utilities can use on the spectrum that they have access to is one of the things that my company has been really trying to advocate within the utility industry for the last couple of years.
We were chatting earlier around private and public networks. Can you tell me more about Great River Energy and the decision to go with a private network with regard to communication?
So We obviously need to have very highly reliable networks for our critical communication. So our SCADA communications, things where you're doing switching, where you need to have an immediate response, those really need to be on private networks because you don't have the reliability, you don't necessarily have the availability. You can get bumped off by kids texting on their cell phones. You have no priority in a commercial network and a public network. And so critical communications really need to be on a private network. There are applications that can run on commercial public networks. Things that are not time critical, capacitor bank controls, you don't necessarily need to have an immediate response. You can control them, and then if it doesn't respond for 30 seconds, it's not a big deal. But when you're switching a line in and out, and you have a technician that's working on the line, you need to know immediately if that line is hot or if it's dead. So there's different applications for public networks and there's different applications for private networks. And then the other issue is that public networks, there's never been a situation where a public network has withstood a major disaster.
Yeah.
All of the commercial networks have gone down at least for some period of time. And as a electric utility, everyone's working to get their power back up as fast as possible. And if you can't communicate to your devices or you can't communicate to your people because it's on a public network that is down, you can't restore the power grid. So the reliability is definitely a key factor in private versus public networks.
Okay. And then finally, what are your top 3 predictions for the industrial communications sector over the next, say, 1 to 2 years?
So with smart grid or future grid modernization, whatever you want to call it, most of that development is going on the distribution grid, which previously has not had a lot of communications. From my viewpoint, one of the key things is we need to be able to have flexible, modular, agile networks. So the way that my company works, we have 28 distribution cooperatives, and so we need to be able to build a network that will serve one of our distribution cooperatives when they are deploying smart grid or they need communications down to their downline devices. But one of our other distribution cooperatives might not want to build something for 5 years. So we can't really build out an entire network.
Yeah.
We have to be able to build it where we need it at that time. Okay. And I think that's probably more of a global issue because even regardless of what your business structure is, very few people are completely deploying downline automation throughout their entire system. It's really kind of on a regional basis, as needed basis. And then with distributed energy resources, that also means that you need to have the ability to communicate with your downline devices or generation resources that are on the distribution side. And as those come online, you need to have the ability to flexibly add those onto your communication network as well. The other thing that I would see as being an issue in the next few years is going to be building partnerships. As I mentioned before, it's very expensive to build our networks. It's challenging to get spectrum. So if we can partner with either other utilities that are in the area or other even telecom providers and build something that works for multiple uses, I think that puts us in a much better situation in the future.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you for your insights into the telecommunications sector within the electricity industry. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this morning. Thank you so much for watching. This is Amy Ryan coming to you from the African Utility Week studio. Thank you.